Today we got a video from the illustrious thinker Think Muslim, who I've looked at one video from before, and I believe at the time I commented that it was among the most annoying videos I've ever looked at on this channel, mainly due to the frenetic editing and awful jokes and just general noise. So hopefully he's toned that down a bit since. Anyway, this one's called Exists, No Religion Needed. Actually, no, it's God Exists. For some reason, the thumbnail's part of the title.
Boom! This is supposed to be Big Bang, by the way.
I'm glad you explained that, because I never would have guessed. It has nothing in common with the Big Bang at all.
Anyways, warning.
Wait a second. Why'd you paste your profile picture over the face of the sign guy? Does that mean something? Or is it just, haha, random, it's the sign guy?
For this video to be truly unbiased and fair, it won't be referencing any specific religion, be it Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Societism, or delusionism.
Oh boy. It's already starting to get on my nerves. I didn't expect this early. I might have made a bad choice responding to this, but it's too late to stop now. I'm several sentences in. The only way out is through.
That's it.
Oh, it's a cat with hands. Ha! That's so random. What am I doing to myself?
Let's clearly state the general and globally acceptable definition of what God is. That is, a necessary thing that created everything. This is the basic, agreeable definition of God across the world and general beliefs.
Okay, well that's a lie. For one thing, of course, there are all kinds of religions where gods come into being. They're born, they have parents, sometimes they even die. There are tons of gods in the history of theism whose existence is not a metaphysical necessity. And of course, some monotheists would say, well then that's not even a god then. Exactly, that's the problem I'm talking about. You say, this is the basic agreeable definition of God. This is general and globally accepted. Well, no, it's not. Also, a god doesn't have to have created everything. That's a monotheistic idea. That's not a universal theistic idea. And it doesn't even have to apply in monotheism. There could be things that just always existed, which God did not create, but he did create the universe. Anyway, when you say this is a generally accepted idea, when you say this is basically just what everyone everywhere thinks a god is, you show three symbols: the cross, the star and crescent, and a seal of Solomon, which is a predecessor to the Star of David. So in other words, you refer only to the three major Abrahamic religions. Apparently, you consider this sufficient to say something is generally accepted as the definition of God. And I sort of wonder if that's because you would reject polytheistic gods as gods at all. As a Muslim, it's very likely that you would do that, but I would not, so we're starting off already in disagreement. We seem not to even agree on what a god is, which is not very useful when the video's intended to convince me. But okay, we'll focus just on the Abrahamic God. Fair enough. So the definition of God you're expecting me to accept here is a necessary thing that created everything. Alright, well, as long as you mean creation in the willful sense, that it's an intentional act by some entity with a mind, then I would accept that such a being is a god. A god has a mind, it has intentions, a will, it thinks, and I would not accept as a god anything that doesn't meet those criteria. I think most people wouldn't. I don't think most people would accept a pantheistic god, for example, that's essentially just another way of referring to an unthinking universe or unthinking reality as a god in anything other than a very metaphorical, poetic sort of sense. And I find that a very reasonable position. If we start calling things like that actual gods in a literal sense, I think we might as well toss the word God in the garbage, because it's become so broad as to be effectively useless. So when I say I'm an atheist, when I say I don't believe in God, I'm not saying I don't believe in the universe. I'm not saying I don't believe in some sort of origin of things or some sort of ultimate reality. I'm saying I don't believe in some willful, thinking, feeling, ultra-powerful, supernatural being, which should be very understandable to someone whose idea about theism is apparently Abrahamic and nothing else. But unfortunately, theists will sometimes try to do this really dumbass thing when they present a definition like this, and try to get atheists to say that they think maybe the universe came from some previous state, which maybe just always was what it is. Maybe it couldn't be otherwise even. And then the theist goes, aha! Then obviously you believe in God, because that's all God actually means. Which is so unbelievably childish and stupid. That's not what the conversation is about. You know it's not what the conversation's about. You know that's not what atheists are trying to tell you they don't believe. You playing dumb doesn't make me look dumb, it makes you look dumb. Stop being dumb. Now, it might sound like all that was pointless to say, but it wasn't, because that dumb bullshit is what's about to happen in this video.
So now, The question follows. Do you believe that the universe had the necessary thing to come to existence?
Necessary in what sense? Metaphysically necessary? Its existence is a necessary truth? It absolutely must be true that this thing must exist in all possible worlds? Then no, I'm not actually convinced that that's a thing. See, necessary truths make sense in terms of like tautologies, logical equivalencies, consistency with definitions. If we define a possible world as one which is logically consistent, then there are propositions which are necessarily true, in the sense of A is A. Again, that's by definition. That's us deciding what the word possible means, based on our conception of logic. But I'm not really convinced that it's a real attribute that real things can have, as an intrinsic aspect of themselves, that their non-existence is an absolute impossibility, independent of literally anything else or any fact about anything, which is what people typically mean when they say God is necessary. So the answer is no. I find this concept extremely far-fetched, and I'm not just going to accept it for no reason other than that it's a word that people use in philosophy.
Do you believe that the universe had the necessary thing to come to existence? Meaning, let's make the argument clearer. For you to exist here today, did you need your mom to give birth to you? The answer is yes.
Oh. What? Wait, are we talking about existence of something as a necessary truth or as a necessary condition for something else? Why are you bringing up parents in this context?
Hopefully, don't confuse your mom and dad. I get that some of you might have a dad with a huge belly and you're wondering when the baby will pop out. But
oh, there's the noises and the annoying editing and the terrible jokes. 3 in 1, hooray!
That's not possible, which is biologically different. Anyways, therefore your mom becomes a necessary thing for you to exist.
Maybe you're not just trying to say your mother existing is a condition that has to be met for you to come about. Maybe you're gonna say something a little more than that. Maybe this is a Saul Kripke rigid designators thing. Maybe. Let me consider that for a second. So Saul Kripke wrote a book called Naming and Necessity, in which he argues that proper names, words that refer to one specific thing, are rigid designators, meaning that they refer to something being the exact same thing in every possible world. Not just something with superficially similar characteristics, but a different nature, I guess. So for example, there's no possible world in which water is not H2O, because H2O simply is what water is. If there was some other world with something watery that looked and smelled and tasted and felt and behaved exactly like water, but was not H2O, that would not be water. It would just be something water-like. It would fit a lot of the descriptions of water without actually being it. And likewise, you, think Muslim, came from your mother, but we could imagine a possible world where there's someone exactly like you in all respects, but who did not come from your mother. And Kripke proposes that this would not in fact be you. Your origin is part of how we define you. So someone with a different origin, no matter how similar to you, isn't you. And he calls these a posteriori necessary truths, as in ones that you have to discover empirically, as opposed to a priori necessary truths which you can know rationally, because they're matters of logical consistency and definition. And so in this view, if you exist, then everything that led to you must necessarily have existed, because otherwise you would not be you, and that's a contradiction. But the problem here is that although in this view, your mother is a necessary, essential part of your identity, of what it is to be you, you don't exist in all possible worlds, and therefore your mother is not necessary in all possible worlds. Yes, it's true in all possible worlds that the identity of what it is to be you involves her, but that doesn't mean there is a you. So this still doesn't get us to metaphysical necessity, this just leaves us with your mother being a necessary condition for your existence. If your mother doesn't exist, even if someone exactly like you in all other respects exists, that's still not you. So she's a necessary condition in a deeper sense than just causal precedence, more in a definitional identity sense. Now, I've seen your videos, I doubt this even occurred to you. You don't seem like the type. I don't know why I even bothered bringing it up, I just thought it was an interesting topic, I guess. Sometimes it's nice to talk about something a little different, but it's highly unlikely that you're referring to this at all, nor should you, because it won't make your point for you. So sorry for wasting your time, I guess.
Following this argument.
Whoa, it's Bigfoot. That's a literal Sasquatch right there. I've seen videos of them before, but they were always kind of blurry. Nice to see what they look like up close and personal. Really, the Bigfoot people love videos of bears walking on 2 legs.
If you accept the fact that the universe at the beginning, meaning that it's finite, with its energy and matter as scientifically proven today, then whatever the necessary cause is for the universe to exist is, by definition, what is called God.
Oh, right. There's the stupid thing I said you were going to do. That's incredibly stupid and dishonest for the aforementioned reasons. I already dealt with it, so I don't need to deal with it again. I talked so much I forgot I even mentioned that. I forgot that was even going to be a thing. Yeah, so definitely not the Kripke thing, but we all knew that. That was just pure mental masturbation on my part. I don't even know what that was about. We'll pretend that never happened. It was just, you have a mom, and your mom has a mom, and so on, back to the Big Bang. Which, by the way, incredibly terrible presentation of that concept. You went one step back, you said, you have a mom. Anyway, Big Bang. Like, you didn't even draw out the connection. Anyone who doesn't already know what you're talking about is going to be like, wait, what is this about a Big Bang? What does this have to do with your mom? Anyway, yeah, you've completely missed the point of what people are referring to when they call God necessary. I already explained what necessary means in the theological context, and it's not this. It's not just being the first in a chain of temporal causes. That would imply that God's necessity is not intrinsic to him. It's not fundamental to him. He obtains it from the creation. If there were no creation, there would be no chain of causation down through time leading to you. There would be no you to trace back up to him. The necessity you propose would be entirely absent. And thus you're proposing that God depends on the creation for one of his properties. It's a denial of his total self-sufficiency and independence, which in Islam is blasphemy.
That's it. God exists.
I can't believe you honestly think you have something with that. You maybe possibly think that there's some first link in the chain of causation. Yeah, well, so you already believe in God. Doesn't matter if you don't think it thinks or cares about anything or has a will or a mind of any kind. Doesn't matter if this is a definition of the word God that almost nobody on the planet would accept or recognize as fully sufficient to describe the concept of a God. Doesn't matter if this is a stupid philosophically and theologically revisionist word game. Pure sophistical equivocation used for no purpose other than a lame meaningless gotcha. Doesn't matter that when atheists say they don't believe in God, this obviously is not what they're trying to express to you, and thus this does nothing to resolve the disagreement, which is still in fact there. No, none of that matters. Some atheist out there might agree with your necessary thing premise, and then nothing will happen or change in any way, and that person won't believe in Allah or any other God any more than before. But then again, at least you got to circle jerk with your co-religionists, so that's something.
Now, I know what some hardcore atheists will say. Well, that's only assuming the universe is finite.
No, it's assuming I let you just redefine the word God for everyone who ever uses it, and then pretend like I think something different than I think. Nothing about the universe matters here.
Or that they will try to come up with new theories such as possibility of multiverse, that there was always something else, which both are not really an argument.
Okay, so all the criticisms you can anticipate involve your opponents taking seriously everything you've said up to this point, except that the universe is finite and had a beginning. Why do you think that's the likely scenario?
The response to the first claim is that the universe is finite.
Obviously, I could not care any less about this, considering it has no relevance. There's no reason to be talking about this right now, but please go on for some reason.
Reason being, to claim that something isn't finite is the same as claiming that it's infinite. And that is simply not true because of two reasons. One is the infinity is not something that science can observe or measure. Therefore, you can't prove its existence within the universe unless you can provide a logical reasoning.
Okay, but that's an argument for why you think you shouldn't believe it's infinite, not for it not being infinite, which is what you're talking about. You said it's not true that it is infinite because you can't justify that belief scientifically or logically. Are you sure you want to go with that? Anything that you can't justify a belief in, either currently or in the future, through science or logic, must not exist. In other words, your capacity for understanding defines reality. Well, of course, the full nature of Allah in Islam is considered to be incomprehensible by humans. Islam says that there's revelation, but that's what you're limited to. You can't understand him in his totality through science or logic, and therefore, according to you, what? He doesn't exist? Or his deeper essence and reality doesn't exist? He's as superficial as words on a page, and you can fully understand him in totality just from that? Is that how you think this works? Because that sounds like blasphemy too.
Though reason number 2 also defeats that reasoning due to the more plausible evidences provided by the Big Bang Theory. So people who make this claim are actually rejecting their scientific evidences and instead choosing to believe in an idea with no proven basis.
Okay, so of course when you say finite, you're talking about chronologically, that the universe had some beginning in time, before which the universe did not exist. But that makes no sense. Time is an aspect of the universe. The universe is not a thing in time. If the spatial dimensions converge along the time dimension in one direction, that doesn't mean there was a time with no universe. In fact, it can't mean that, because what the hell does time mean without the universe defining time? You really do not understand the concept that you're talking about. And if you think what I just said contradicts anything you've shown on the screen there, that's because you don't understand the concept, because you haven't bothered to think about it. Think.
That, by definition, is blind faith.
Instead of spending all this time editing in slamming sounds and anime pictures, maybe spend some time learning to understand anything you're showing here. Now, of course, yeah, none of this really has much to do with this ridiculous slap fight you're having with your straw man about whether the universe is finite or infinite. This is about your total misunderstanding of the nature of time in relation to the universe. So the point is that until you actually understand that relationship to some extent, you might want to stop making arguments like this because they don't actually support your claim in the way you think they do. This does not support the idea that at some point in the past there was no universe. The past is conceptually an aspect of the universe. To say there's a universalist point in the past is to say the universe existed without existing, which is a contradiction. Now, if you want to propose some other view of time, where time is some sort of container external to the universe that can contain the universe, fine, but you haven't done that. You invoked physical and cosmological views of this, which don't agree with that. You didn't have to do that, but you did it, so you get to deal with that now.
The second claim's response is that it's fine. It doesn't really matter if you want to believe in multiverse or aliens that created the universe, because the argument is whatever was in the beginning that caused everything that exists is by definition called God. So this isn't a claim either against the existence of an origin.
Well, the multiverse, if true, would at least really mess up your concept of a beginning. Again, time is a thing within universes. In a multiverse, there are many different universes, but the multiverse itself doesn't need to be a thing with a beginning. Another concept that you don't understand and you're dismissing out of hand. It's kind of funny how you expect people to just randomly go along with you when you just bring up ideas you have no clue about, and then basically just go, nah, that's obviously wrong, my religion's obviously right because I said so. Okay, well no, that is not sufficient to discount alternative possibilities.
Now we should pause here for a sec, because the matter of fact is, we know that no one will actually reject that everything had an origin and there must be an ultimate origin for reality and the universe, etc.
Okay, well obviously some people will. The Big Bang does not remove the possibility that there is no such origin in the sense that you're describing. And of course the multiverse needs no origin at all. And there are all kinds of other views that propose eternal universes and whatever. People can reasonably disagree on this issue, or they can do it unreasonably. But in any case, people can disagree with you. Now in Islam, disagreement with this idea, and the proposal for example of an eternal universe, is blasphemy. So of course Muslims will think that no reasonable person would possibly disagree with it, because it goes against Islam. But not everyone's a Muslim. And of course not every Muslim knows or cares about or agrees with these details of the religion. There are plenty of people on this planet who do not accept Islamic doctrine and are open to alternatives.
That's basic logic.
No, that's basically just you saying bits and pieces of Islamic belief without saying the word Islam. You said you were going to make this video truly unbiased and fair with no reference to any religion, but essentially all you've said so far is the only valid position is your religious position because you say so. There's been no particular argument to establish it, it's just sort of taken as obvious. It doesn't become a religiously neutral video just because you don't say the name of the religion you're assuming is true.
No reasonable person will say otherwise.
Yeah, reasonable people say things you think align with Islam, so if they say different things, they must not be reasonable. Who knows what they say or why they say it? Clearly you have no fucking clue, but they obviously can't be reasonable people, they must just be crazy.
Though we should be also aware that this is the actual definition of God. Origin of origins.
Okay, fine. If you want me to redefine it that way, fine. God is a mindless multiverse, full of quantum fluctuations, purely physical, no will, no thoughts, no intelligence, no intentions, no prophets, no books, no heaven, no hell. Nothing was done for any design or purpose, and that's all Allah is. There, you're happy now, right? That's the kind of thing you're clearly really thinking of when you say the word God. Fucking spare me, dude. I know the kind of thing you want me to believe in when you tell me God exists. You're not making this video to convince me of something like what I just said. So drop the act, own your idea, and argue for that. The fact that you feel a need to keep up this pretense that we're here to talk about something different is so pathetic.
So some people who are watching probably don't want to admit the existence of an origin because we've defined it as God.
Because you've defined it as God. Yeah, I don't care what you define as anything. If there's an origin, there's an origin. Great, wonderful. That doesn't make it a God. Not by any definition I would recognize or care about. When I label myself an atheist, I don't interpret that term in relation to your silly redefinitions. You're trying to redefine me into a theist, but my opinions stay the same. Just give it up.
However, that's the issue. God isn't a white-bearded old man sitting on the clouds or an imaginary story taught as a tale.
And as an example of the imaginary story taught as a tale, you show, are you there, God? It's me, you. So in other words, the Christian God is out the window as being God. That knocks out one of your 3 global interpretations of what a God is.
Those who think this way, with all due respect, are delusional.
Okay, and what? These are the alternatives to thinking of God as just any origin? Your options are whatever came first is God, no matter what that is or what it's like, or white-bearded old man Christian fairy tale.
That's why we should go with definitions and not by our own interpretations.
What? What do you think a definition is? Choosing a definition is interpretation. We choose and discuss and agree upon definitions to try to make interpretation easier. And so, for example, when I say I'm an atheist, perhaps rather than trying to gotcha me by reinterpreting the word to mean something completely different from anything I would accept, you should ask me to try to explain to you exactly what it is that I don't believe. Because that's what's important here. The words aren't important. If you want to redefine a rock as God, go for it. Then I'll believe in God because I believe in rocks. But now we've muddied the interpretive waters by mixing up terminology in a way that obscures what I actually think. We've diminished the quality of the discussion for no reason. Now, obviously, I don't believe in God even by your definition here, but I could. I find it a bit questionable, but I don't find it completely ridiculous in principle. So sure, I could believe that, and then we could redefine me as not an atheist anymore, but everything stays the same. I still don't believe in any God reflective of any religion or theistic system on the face of the earth. That definition doesn't even come up to the level of making God something supernatural. Like, what do you think that this is accomplishing? It's a gigantic red herring, a complete waste of time. It's a way of avoiding the conversation.
And the definition is very clear. A necessary thing that created everything.
The definition. As if this definition is somehow baked into reality itself and you've discovered it. We should rely on the definition, not our own interpretations. What do you think the definition is? Where do you think it came from? No, I'm not just going to accept your preferred definition as some factual truth about reality. For me to accept something as a god, that thing having a mind is a basic requirement. If it doesn't have one, I'm not going to refer to it as a god because I think that's incredibly silly. It serves no purpose and confuses the issue.
Question. If God is the one who created everything, then who created God?
This is not really worth entertaining, but okay, fine. Let's talk about it, for whatever that's worth.
This question usually stems from a misunderstanding about the definition of God, because what we define as God is the starting point for all that exists, because if there is no starting point, there can be no today.
In other words, the past can't continue infinitely into the past, because there would have had to be infinite moments leading to today, and therefore we never would have got here. That's some old school A theory of time kind of stuff, where time really actually flows. How it seems to a human is really how it is. The present moment is really something distinct from all other moments, and constantly changing, and there's only one present, which I have a lot of trouble believing at this point. I'm much more of a B theory bro, just sort of instinctively, but whether that's true or not, regardless of the true nature of time, it is at least possible that it doesn't work the way you think. But this argument must deny that possibility to work, which I don't accept. And it also tries to special plead for God. If you can believe something can possess infinities, like God, then you can believe something else can possess infinities, like the universe. The universe can have an infinite regress. In either case, God or the universe, or reality more broadly, so third case, I think the rejection of that possibility implies a lack of imagination. I think there may be things that we simply cannot understand, which would be incomprehensible to really imagine. I think that there may be things which are truly infinite, in ways that would be incredibly hard for us to wrap our heads around, which would seem totally unintuitive, and to which a very natural first reaction would be to assume that it's impossible. There are things in physics that are accepted now, which seemed very impossible in the past, and yet...
If your mom didn't exist, you couldn't exist either. If your grandma didn't exist, you again wouldn't exist. If we infinitely go back to who came from who, we will never arrive to the present.
Oh, so you did actually sort of expand on the point with the mother, but you did it here, minutes later. Well, that's useful.
Logically, for us to exist today, we need to have a starting point for all of our origins, and that by definition is called God.
I gotta be honest, I'm considering just quitting on this video, just calling it done here and not even bothering with the rest of it, because this definition thing is getting really annoying. I don't know how many more times I want to listen to it.
A necessary thing that is eternal.
There's you tossing in the word necessary again, and again based on a misunderstanding of what the word means in the context of God. A misunderstanding which, as I pointed out earlier, is implicitly blasphemous. You should really stop doing that. Your soul is on the line, brother.
Question. Fine, let's accept that there is a God by definition. Doesn't mean that it's also conscious?
No, your definition doesn't, which is why it's so worthless.
The answer is, it depends on how you define consciousness.
No, it doesn't. Your definition does not say God has to be conscious regardless of your definition. The word isn't there, but I would say the definition could really benefit from having it there in terms of usefulness.
Because even in science, consciousness isn't something that is fully defined.
And then to back that up, you show a screenshot saying that scientists don't fully understand consciousness as in how it works. That's different from not having a definition of the word. But regardless, yeah, it is a hard word to define if you want to make it really clear. And of course, there are plenty of edge cases that you can point to where there would be lots of difficulties and disagreements over whether they're covered by the definition. So that I would agree with. But regardless, I think we can come up with some minimal definition and say that a god would have to have at least that. Although that shouldn't really be necessary, because at least Allah should meet a maximal definition. He should be the most conscious thing imaginable. So whatever it is that we subjectively feel as the experience of consciousness, he has that, but he has infinitely more of every aspect of it.
If it's defined as a general awareness of oneself and surroundings, then yes, God is conscious in that sense.
Oh really? Wow. We're rolling that into the definition now? Great, then I don't believe in that. I don't think there is such a thing. Why would you admit that when the whole point of the video up to this point was to screw around trying to find excuses not to include that in the definition? You just undid multiple minutes of trying to score stupid gotchas by not including this. You can't even stick to your own silly little game for one video.
God is conscious in that sense. Reason being that science has a concept known as the hard problem of consciousness. It refers to the challenge of explaining why and how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experiences. And this being the reason why science can't observe and define consciousness fully.
Okay, and if we can't define consciousness or explain how it works, suddenly the necessary eternal first cause has consciousness. What does our inability to understand something have to do with that? Is this another example of the creation assigning Allah's attributes to him? Once we have a complete understanding of consciousness, will Allah suddenly lose his?
Take gravity, for example. We don't directly detect it with our five senses.
Detect it as in what exactly it is and how it works, right? Not the effect. Before anyone brings up dropping an apple or something as an example.
However, we can define and observe how it works and apply the same principle of law to other planets in the universe.
Okay, so you're pointing out there that you can observe the effects, even if you don't understand the cause. And you call this observing how it works. Okay.
Consciousness, on the other hand, can't be observed by science for this very reason.
Consciousness can't be observed? Well, yeah, you can. Just like with gravity, you can observe the effects. That's what you said you're observing with gravity. And then you went on to say that observing the effects is observing how it works. In what way are you saying that you can't observe consciousness?
Can't be observed by science for this very reason, as it is not a purely physical phenomenon.
Oh, really? Based on what?
For example, humans can go through the same situations, but our experiences processed through consciousness will be interpreted differently and will never be exactly the same.
Okay, so? Your example with gravity was of different planets having different gravitational attraction. Drop an object on all those different planets, and there will be differences in the results because it's a different situation. Now, I wouldn't want there to be any confusion. There, you said we can define a law of gravity and apply that everywhere. Of course, consciousness is not a law of physics. There's no law of consciousness that you can just apply. Consciousness is not some fundamental physical principle, of course. It's the operation of a complex system. So maybe a better analogy related to gravity would be if you have two mountains on opposite sides of a valley, and there's an earthquake, and both mountains have a big rock slide, and rock slide A and rock slide B are not identical. They have different initial conditions, they're very complicated systems. For them to somehow occur in the exact same way would be so unlikely as to be effectively impossible. Now, you'll notice that this does not make rock slides unobservable or unable to be investigated scientifically, or indeed non-physical. But you're claiming that that's the case with consciousness because different people's brains will respond differently to the same stimulus. Well, what's the argument?
Like if two people eat the same slice of an apple, one might find it, delicious, but he can never truly grasp how the other person experienced from that exact same bite.
Yes, sure, we can't feel each other's qualia sensations. What is it like to be a bat and all that? But that's a different topic now. What are you trying to establish with this? That one rock slide can't be the other one, and therefore they're both non-physical or unobservable? You're saying things that don't seem to mean much.
So the reality of consciousness is generally explained simply as being aware of oneself and surroundings. It's not something solely physical, one reason being that it's subjective in nature.
That means nothing? Like, actually nothing. I have no idea what you think that's supposed to mean in relation to it being non-physical.
And two being that no energy, matter, atoms, neurons, or any other physical objects possess the attributes of consciousness to produce the kind of consciousness that humans have.
Yeah, and bits of plastic and metal and silicon don't have YouTube videos in them. Therefore, there couldn't possibly be a physical basis for the YouTube video I'm watching right now. Computers are literal magic. What do I even need this stupid box for? I don't need that. I just need to rip the soul out of the computer and it'll do the same thing. And I'll have so much more space in my house.
Some might call this as soul, and others might refer to as consciousness. Both can be legitimate depending on the definition. The main point is, if humans possess the consciousness, then the origin that created them must have it as well. After all, one of the basic rules in physics is that something cannot give what it doesn't already possess.
Oh cool, a basic rule of physics that's not at all a rule of physics. The closest there is something like conservation of energy, but that's not what this is, and it's not what you said. Now, I know you didn't just make that up because I've heard this before, so that leaves us with the alternative that you were just too dumb to question it. Now, I don't know if or how you missed this, but consciousness is not proposed to be some law of physics, or some particle, or some property of energy or matter. It's a process. It's not a thing, it's an occurrence. This is why I used the analogy to the YouTube video. If we come across a YouTube video playing on a computer screen, and we have no idea how it works, it's going to be incredibly difficult to figure that out. Even at the physical level, it's a total tangled mess. But then we would also have to most likely reverse engineer multiple layers of abstraction on top of the physical substrate, which is easier than figuring out how the brain works, by the way, because computers and everything they do and YouTube videos, being designed things and processes, are intentionally made to be orderly. Although sometimes with lower quality design or programming, they might end up a little less orderly than we wish. But nevertheless, that's typically the intention, which means that the astonishing difficult effort of understanding the process from scratch is vastly easier than understanding the organically grown, maximally spaghettified nonsense of the human brain. And also, you can investigate a computer any way you want to without worrying about anyone dying. But still, for understanding the process of playing a YouTube video with no prior knowledge, no debug tools, no logs, no source code, no nothing, just with, what, a multimeter? Maybe is sort of an equivalent to the tools we use to investigate the human brain? That's insanely difficult, and it's entirely possible that no matter how much work we put into it, we would never reach a fully satisfactory answer to exactly how it works. It's almost unreasonable to even expect that we would. But that doesn't mean we have to go proposing pan-YouTube videoism, or that it's not a physical phenomenon, or that it had to have been granted to the computer by the necessary eternal YouTube video haver, because YouTube videos can't be played by physical things that don't already include the property of playing YouTube videos. You're leaping to a conclusion you want based on nothing other than a totally fake law of physics that someone made up based on nothing. And the conclusion that you want to get to is that God is conscious. Because as I've said over and over, you're not satisfied with God just being some non-conscious thing that's necessary and first. Because you're a theist. That's what theists believe, is that the thing is also conscious. Otherwise, it's not a God. You would never be satisfied actually calling something like that a god. So can we finally drop the pretense now that you're rolling consciousness in?
So whether our consciousness is fully physical or not physical, it both requires a necessary thing that has the attribute to create them.
The attribute being consciousness. Great. Well, much like you don't seem to understand really anything you've talked about up to this point, I don't think you understand even the basic idea of what people talk about consciousness being, or even really the basic idea of physical reality at all. So let's move on then.
Another proof of consciousness of God and why it must possess a will is because things in the universe are different from one another.
Oh, it must possess a will. Well, if it must, if there's no alternative, then that seems like part of the definition of what a god even is. It's an essential property. A god must have it, in which case non-willful first causes would not count, because they lack a property that a god must have. So you've just made the entire first half of your video irrelevant, and dismantled your attempt to say that atheists believe in God. It's amazing to see a video with so much effort put into the obnoxious editing, and so little effort put into anything important.
Things in the universe are different from one another, from matter to energy to different laws of nature, which implies the necessity of choice.
No, there's nothing about the state of things being unchosen that implies that it must be totally uniform. There's no connection there. This is just you telling me your religion again.
Because before the universe, there were no laws of creation, such as the laws of motion, gravitation, thermodynamics, cause and effect.
Well, yeah, obviously, laws of physics are human descriptions of regularities observed in nature. They don't exist in nature. But yes, nature itself appears to be consistent with itself. It is as it is and not as it's not, which doesn't seem that shocking whether it was made or not.
These laws and objects around us, like trees, rocks, stars, water, with different shapes, sizes, and color, require a choice to exist, because without a choice, everything would be the same. We won't have any distinct object from one another.
So the assertion is that there's some basic expectation of how nature would be, absent choice. And the way that nature would be is that it would be totally homogeneous and have no physical predictability. I guess because there would be no physical activity of any sort. Okay, why? Why are you taking that as like baseline physical reality? That's not some uncontroversial claim. If you want me to accept that, you're going to have to justify it somehow. But you don't give an argument, you just say it as if it's obvious fact. And what a surprise that is. You've been doing that the whole video.
And just so we're all on the same page, this isn't a design argument. Rather, it's to show that laws and the information within the objects require intelligence in order for them to possess the attributes that allow them to function after they begin to exist.
You said this is not a design argument, and then you said something that sounds an awful lot like a design argument. Regardless, I don't accept it because you didn't even bother to argue for it. Again, you're just telling me your religion. It's not automatically compelling just because you said it.
Question: can there be multiple gods? Why is it limited to one, and is it limited to one?
Wow, I sure don't care. This is a meaningless detail. This is something you can go argue about with the polytheists. All I'm interested in is 0 and 1+.
The answer is yes.
The answer to can there be multiple gods ? Why is it limited to one ? Brackets and is it limited to one ? Is yes. Just Chad yes in general. One of those questions isn't a yes or no question, and one of them, if you answer yes, allows polytheism and contradicts another one. But whatever, meaningless details. Yes.
God's nature can only be one for its possible existence. Why? Well, even if, for the sake of the argument, we assume multiple origins, then what we'll have is utter chaos. It's like driving a car with 2 drivers, or having multiple CEOs in a company with equal power. The real issue arises from each having its own consciousness, because with consciousness comes the free will.
Oh, I don't believe that either. It's like every time you make an argument, I disagree with all your premises. Everything you've said in this whole video misses horribly.
If all the origins possess free will as equal, then there can be either of 2 scenarios. First is the free will equal and same in nature. Second is the free will equal, but different in nature.
I'm really starting to get bored now. This feels deeply irrelevant. I'm really not interested in different flavors of theists' debates with each other.
Second scenario is basically not possible to exist. If something's nature of will is different but equal in power, one god or origin can choose to create a tree in green and the other can choose red. One can create Earth round, the other in cube. One can create the Milky Way and the other choose not to. So if this was the case, 2 origins simply would cancel each other out and we wouldn't exist.
Okay, but that's assuming that everything they want to create contradicts each other. Literally everything would have to contradict, and literally everything would have to cancel out to 0. For example, here's a really interesting idea. What if both of these gods, created and uncreated, whatever they felt like, and the contradictory things canceled out, and the only things left were the things they agreed on? That'd be kind of an interesting process for creating a universe, where all that remains is the very small selection of everything that was originally proposed, which just happened to overlap. What's left, compared to what was originally created, could be very near to zero, but non-zero. You ignored that possibility entirely, but I think it's really cool. Another thing to consider is, why would two attempts to create the same thing in a different form result in it canceling out and not existing at all? There could be two versions of it side by side, or more interestingly, they find a compromise and say the sphere Earth and the cube Earth average out to kind of a round-sided cube. That'd be fun, and hey, God is always proposed to be this being of maximal greatness, right? Well, what if one of the greatnesses, one of the characteristics that a God must maximally have, because it's one of the character traits that we humans most value, is the ability to compromise, or to find amicable agreement? Maybe these are the most agreeable beings conceivable, and thus disagreements simply cannot be a problem. It's not in their nature. Is that not possible? And if not, why not? Or how about this? They do both have free will, and they're capable, in principle, of disagreeing with each other, and maybe they do on some issues, unrelated to the universe itself, but it's their nature to always do the thing that's maximally good. And as it turns out, the objectively maximally good universe looks exactly like this one. And unlike perhaps on non-universe issues, there are no equally good universes, and so on the topic of universes, they don't disagree. And so both of them, in their free will, always choose to do exactly this, because this is the perfectly good thing that they want to do. See, I can just make things up too. I can do this all day.
And the first claim of having the equal free will and nature will, meaning that all the origins wants the same thing always and all the time, then this argument is a refutation to itself, because we can't separate two things from one another if there is no distinction we can identify.
Who says? Who are you to say that? Sure, these might be the divine version of the Borg, and all want the same thing all the time, but that doesn't mean they can't distinguish among themselves. They have the same desires, that doesn't make them the same beings. Not necessarily, anyway. You might think it's confusing, but you're a human. So, of course you're confused. You're not some omniscient, perfectly intelligent God. But they are, so maybe they can figure it out. You might not see them as separate, but the reality of the situation doesn't depend on what you think.
So the first claim doesn't really prove or disprove anything. This argument might seem subjective at first.
Well, it seems like you've wanted to find some objection, and you pulled something out of your ass, which can be cancelled out by someone else pulling something else out of their ass, resulting in your argument never existing, in the manner of two equally powerful gods.
However, according to this claim, accepting one necessary source doesn't require us to accept the other copy-paste sources, because for the universe to exist, there's one necessary origin needed. Exact other same origins are not necessary for existence.
No, because again, necessity is not about existence. The creation does not give God his necessity. Necessity is an essential property. It's the case regardless of existence, regardless of if anything was ever created. So all of the clone gods are necessary. That is one of their essential properties, and to deny it is blasphemy.
And so, we don't have any reason to believe it.
Oh yes you do, because all those gods want you to go to hell if you don't. That's the reason, so get on it. Denying even one of them means an eternity in the hellfire.
Another argument for multi-god existence is, what if the gods have also differences in free will? Well, that's even easier to refute, because then whoever has the highest free will and power becomes the authority over the others. So the existence of God still includes a single origin.
Okay, whatever. I don't care. One god, a million gods, it makes no difference. I don't believe in any of them. So is that it?
That's it.
Good. Finally.
Before ending this video, we'll clearly state one last time the definition of God. A necessary thing that created everything.
Didn't I say I was considering stopping the video the last time you brought that up? I am so sorely tempted to stop this entirely right now. But there's only a couple of minutes left of this, so I guess I'll be a completionist and go through the rest. I don't know why.
And has the attributes of necessarily eternal, necessary consciousness, and necessary oneness.
Oh, so you actually are expanding the definition with things like consciousness now. So the definition that you gave before wasn't actually your definition of a god. I was totally right the entire time. And when you tried to leave this stuff out and pretend like that's all you think a god is, you were completely lying. What a surprise.
All that has been said. Do you think we're done?
No.
No. Of course not.
No, of course not.
The evidences are just not ending.
Evidences? I didn't know the evidences were ever starting. Where was that supposed to be?
And though this will be the last touch on our beautiful brain on the existence of God, that is, we're naturally created in a way that we are inclined to believe in God.
Oh, is this going to be some theism's really globally common thing? Or humans tend to assign human-like agency to stuff? That's a great way to end the video. Bore everybody.
What? What the freak are you on about? Well, this is not me saying it. This is an actual research called Born Believers that has been studied under Oxford University by researchers who are atheists themselves.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about the book. I'm not diving into a book review this late in the video. I will say, though, the book is not an Oxford University publication. It's written by a guy who used to be a researcher at Oxford, and I guess to some extent it talks about things he was doing there. And you say that this was studied by researchers who are atheists themselves. And then you show this. Now, I assume at least some of these are people who worked with Justin Barrett, the author, and it's a bunch of AI overviews you got off Google. And there's some weird things about it. For example, you have Jesse Bering twice, and you have Paul Bloom twice, and it's the exact same overviews in both cases. And then looking at them more specifically, you have Paul Harris, the founder of Rotary, who was an attorney who died in 1947 and was not a researcher. So why you're putting him here as if he is one of the researchers, who knows? It also doesn't say he was an atheist. It says he didn't affiliate with any specific denomination. It also says, though, that he went to several sermons each Sunday at different churches. Sounds like a real atheist. Then you have Rebecca Richert, described as a psychology professor, not a religion herself. Well, yeah, I would imagine not. Religions tend not to be human. Who knows what gibberish she typed in to get that result? In any case, though, doesn't say anything about atheism. Then you got Pascal Boyer, known for his evolutionary approach to understanding religion, is what you've highlighted. So again, nothing about atheism. So what is your goal with this? Spam this up on the screen and hope it looks like enough text that people think it lends you some kind of legitimacy? What absurd behavior. Yes, laughable. Exactly.
After their research on kids across 20 different countries like China, Japan, who are born in non-religious families, they've studied through evidences that kids do in fact show signs of believing in a higher power, no matter their background. Then the research concludes with, after humans grow up, our ideas and thoughts change through the society and social life we've grown up in. This has been concluded with that belief in God is actually part of our brain that we naturally possess. Kind of like we all have rhythm, that the brain naturally catches the pattern when we listen to a melody or singing. Like that, the belief in higher power or purpose is also one of the parts of human brain that we have, which later on in our lives converts the ideas and thoughts that are around the society and social life we grow up in. That's why in our history, there were no civilizations completely disbelieved, whether it may be monotheistic or pagan religions. People always believed in something.
All right, I just let that play because I wanted it to be clear that, yeah, it's exactly what I thought it was. Go figure that humans do things in line with human psychology. What a shock. This has nothing whatsoever to do with the existence or non-existence of God. This is simply about a quirk of the human psyche, which can be explained in any number of different ways, and has been. I already knew about all of this, and before now it wasn't enough to make me suddenly start believing you, so it's not going to be now either. It's pretty obvious that people want this to be true, and in fact find it intuitive, and it's pretty obvious that there's psychological reasons for both of those things, but that doesn't make your God real. But I'm going to stop talking about it now because we're pretty close to the end. We're so close to the end of this video I can almost taste it, and I want to taste it, so let's go.
And someone today might claim that religions were created to control people and unite them through deception, and they wouldn't be entirely wrong.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, I guess. Although I don't think that's the only place religions come from. I think that's an element of it, maybe even a big one. But I also think there's a lot of sincere error involved as well, for example. And whatever, other stuff too, I guess. It's not one-dimensional.
There are indeed historical cases where religious leaders controlled the masses in the name of the religion. However, the point remains. The fact that the people believed shows the natural inclination toward belief. And this inclination comes from the very origin that created us.
See, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I talk about sincere error. I think you might honestly believe that that's a compelling line of argument because you just can't see the problem. If we have a tendency to think about the whole world in terms of human-like agency, then there must, in fact, be a human-like agent on a much bigger scale than us, a world scale, who wanted us to think that way. It's fallacious reasoning. It doesn't follow. It's a case of affirming the consequent. Premise 1, if God exists, he would give humans an inclination to believe in him. Premise 2, humans have such an inclination, therefore God exists. P implies Q, Q therefore P. And that's assuming you even accept the first premise there, but I'll do it, who cares? The argument's invalid anyway.
So if God exists, and he gave us a natural inclination to believe in him, then that gives birth to a necessary guidance.
Oh, guidance, like a religion? Something like the Quran? And why would this be necessary? God gives you innate belief for his own reasons, and therefore it's necessary that he provides some kind of religious guidance. Why? You didn't present a chain of reasoning leading to that, you're just saying a different thing.
But this isn't a topic about which religion is true and which are false.
No, far be it from you to imply anything of the sort. Certainly hasn't happened at all in this video. But why, when you just said it's not about which religion's true and which one's false, did you show a graphic of change in population size? What's that supposed to be? Some kind of appeal to popularity? Islam's projected to grow a lot in the next few decades, therefore it's more likely true? You don't know what an argument is, do you?
The point of this video is, yeah, God exists.
Okay, maybe you should have made the point better then. Seriously, you spent so much time on pointless garbage, making your video look like trash, instead of actually focusing on crafting a compelling argument. Although I do understand the difficulty in doing that from your position, but it could have been better, at least, with some effort. Anyway, I guess that's that. Alright, thank you for watching. Subscribe, like. If you like the channel, please do consider supporting. Huge thanks to my supporters. See you next time.